The Tombs of Amascut has arrived in Old School RuneScape. For a lot of players, they may not be sure if they can even participate in this content, and that's what I'm going to help you try and find out. Can you do TOA? The answer is actually probably. Now I want to go ahead and set expectations here. If you are somebody who's kind of stuck in that rut, you can't decide whether you're still a mid-game account or if you've actually made it to the end game. Well, if you can do a couple bosses, you've got a bank value at about 20 mil, maybe you've been into the Chambers of Xeric with some buddies. If that's you, you can probably do TOA. With the release of this new raid, the OSRS dev team did something that has changed the game in accessibility. Now, while entry mode raids aren't necessarily a new thing to Old School, TOA is the first raid to come into the game with entry mode from the very start. For those who are familiar with the concept of an entry mode raid already, maybe you've completed the Theater of Blood entry mode, you'll know that it's an easier version of the same raid. A lot of the same mechanics are still there. Now granted, if you do solo versus a team, some of those mechanics will be missing, but for the most part, everything's still kind of the same. The difficulty, however, in the boss health scaling and defense and all that is drastically lower in an entry mode raid. Albeit, in the Theater of Blood, you have no access to any uniques, and the loot is scaled back to where you could just do other bosses at that level of account progression. Now this is where the Old School team has really changed the game with entry mode TOA compared to entry mode TOB. In entry mode TOB, while you have no access to any uniques whatsoever, in entry mode TOA, you do. You can get 4 uniques at raid level 0, which is no invocations, you just make your party and go. These 4 uniques are the Thread of Elidness and the 3 jewels for the Karis Partisan. At level 50, which is still considered an entry mode raid, you then also get access to the Lightbearer Ring and Osmumpton's Fang, which are both really good, especially for a level 50 raid. In addition to having access to so many uniques at such a low level, the loot table, it's actually not awful. There's a lot of seed drops that can make your loot pretty valuable, especially if you go in, get used to it, and have no deaths. You can probably make a decent amount of money per hour. So we know that just based on the difficulty between entry to normal, that the raid is obviously easier. We know that there's good loot incentives, but what exactly makes Tombs of Amascut so accessible? Now, I am by no means an elite PVMer. In fact, I think I'm pretty subpar compared to most people I know, but I do still get by quite well by just doing what I'm supposed to do. And something that the Tombs of Amascut does really well is tells you what you're supposed to do. In my personal opinion, one of the things in this game that helps when you're an early stage PVMer is when you can see something and you can react to it. A lot of memorization of like, oh, I'm gonna have to pray this, I'm gonna have to keep track of that, that makes things a little bit harder for a lot of people. But when you can see something and then know, okay, now I need to click my mage prayer, now I need to click my range prayer, now I need to click my melee prayer. When you can see it and then react to it, that really, really helps that early stage PVM. Now, by no means is this a new thing in the game. There are a lot of bosses that have some kind of visual indicator that helps you know, like, okay, this is when I need to do this. Some good examples are Jad, Zora, the Gauntlet, Alchemical Hydra. These are all things that can be challenging at first, but once you know the visual indicators, it makes life a whole lot easier. The best example that I can use for this within the Tombs of Amascut is the Crocodile Boss. So, Zabak has 2 unique auto attacks. One, it's going to shoot these jagged boulders from its mouth. Those are going to break apart and attack every player on the field. That is a range attack. Its second auto attack, it shoots a weird pot from its mouth that's going to break apart, and then red balls are going to go to every player. That's its mage attack. This is so easy because you have so much time to see and react to this, versus comparing it to Olm, where you don't really know what its next attack is going to be. You can kind of figure based on its last attack it has a higher probability of attacking with the same, but most of the time you have to just tank a hit and then change from there. Key mechanics like this make bosses so much easier for a lot of people, and it's not just something that's unique to Zabak. It occurs in other rooms in the raid, including Akka, the human boss, and the main final bosses, the wardens, where you see some form of animation that tells you, okay, now I need to switch my prayer. So in my mind, in my honest opinion, I believe that having those key visual reactionary elements in the game are fundamental for helping players with their confidence and their situational awareness, two things that are very key in PvM. However, there are also some other things that do contribute to why this is so easy. If you go in with no invocations set to limit this opportunity, then in every raid, once you defeat 2 bosses, you're greeted by a helpful spirit. The helpful spirit will give you a choice of supplies. You have 3 different packages that you can choose from. You have life, you have power, and you have chaos. And these packages are so overpowered, and a lot of people even believe that it may get nerfed. So generally, within the life package, you are going to have some brews, you're going to have some restores. There are these silk bandages that will heal you over time, and a blessed scarab that will restore your prayer over time. If you choose to go with the package of power, you're going to have access to what is hands down the most important thing you can get in the raid, and that is the liquid ambrosia. It is a full prayer restore and a full health restore, with a little bit of overcharge in both, and poison cure. Additionally, you can get liquid adrenaline, which will reduce your special attack usage by 50% for any weapon spec you use. And there's also the smelling salts. The smelling salts are the second most overpowered thing, in that they are like an overload potion from Chambers of Zarek or Nightmare Zone, and they boost all your combat stats, but even more than overloads do. You will go up to 125 on all your combat stats if they're 99. Now I understand, for this video, not everybody will be 99, so you may get a little bit lower, but that's still a massive 26 boost. Not for certain yet if that scales based on level or if it's set. I imagine it probably scales, but regardless, it's huge to increase your chances at putting out damage. Now, the Chaos package is pretty unique in that you can pull from both the life and the power packages. It gives you kind of a mix. There might be a chance to get some salts and ambrosia in there. I don't think I've ever seen liquid adrenaline in there. I think that's specific to power, but I very well could be wrong on that. All that aside, these are huge, huge helpful supply drops that you can get within the raid. Your first 2 bosses and then the last 2 bosses. So when you go into that final boss room, you're guaranteed to have something good that you can get. So visual reaction mechanics and insane supply drops are the 2 main factors that I believe make this raid incredibly easy. Some more minute factors is just the way that it utilizes the full combat triangle. Throughout the Tombs of Amascut raid, you're going to see unique usage from all three combat styles. When you compare it to Chambers of Xeric, which is pretty range heavy, or you compare it to the Theater of Blood, which is really melee heavy, you have a unique opportunity to use everything and anything, and that significantly helps. While there are some weapons that significantly outshine others throughout this raid, you can get by in an entry mode with pretty budget gear. A tentacle whip, a toxic blowpipe, and even just a base Trident of the Seas can get you in the door, and you can have a wonderful experience with just those weapons. Granted, I'll flash up on the screen real quick what I think an ideal entry loadout would be under 20 mil, but you can make a few adjustments here if you don't quite have that much in the bank, and you can still get it done. So as you'll have noticed by this point, this isn't particularly a guide. I'm not going over the mechanics of each individual boss. I want you to take this as more encouragement that you don't have to be years worth of progress in the game. You don't have to be a maxed main. Granted, some level 60 Andy in his full Zammy rune armor and a team cape probably can't jump in and expect a KC. But if you are somebody who's just right there in that rut and you are trying to take that step from mid-game to end-game PVM, this is a place where you can do that. This is an experience that you can have that is going to teach you a lot of valuable things about PVM in this game, and will make you a lot better in the long run and give you the opportunity to have fun, whether solo or with friends. The scaling is very, very forgiving, and nearly anybody with at least a 20 mil bank and honestly base 80 combat stats can really get in here, dive in, and have a fantastic experience. This is the most accessible raid in Old School RuneScape to date, and I love the direction that the Old School team went with this, and I love the overall experience, everything from the aesthetics to the mechanics to the rewards. Everything is fantastic, and I am absolutely over the moon with the implementation of this raid. I hope that you will have watched this video, and by the end of this, be encouraged to jump in if you haven't already. I really hope that this creates a new love for PVM in a lot of players in this game. And if you've watched to this point, thank you for stopping by. This is where we're going to end the video here, and if you appreciated the video, feel free to drop a subscription, drop a like, and hang out for more content like this in the future.